Well, it's been quite a week here. On top of the upcoming Is Genesis History Science series that I'm co-producing with the Science Denier Hall of Shame channel, I opened my house last week to a foster beagle puppy. Well, this week she got quite sick and needed emergency surgery to deal with complications from events before I got her. So I wasn't sure I'd be able to get any video out to you this week. I asked my friend Morgan, who's not actually my friend, but rather someone who watches my videos, is super smart, and enjoys submitting herself to endless Ken ham exposure even more than I do, if she'd want to take a crack at this week's Ham and Egg News. I have no idea what she's going to say, so in the spirit of handing my channel over to some rando from the internet, take it away, Morgan.
Thanks, Paul. Let's get started.
Well, good afternoon on this rainy day here in northern Kentucky. Hey, I'm back. I wasn't here last week. Georgie, do you want to introduce the first article here?
Sure. So the first article we're going to talk about has been all over Facebook, all over the media. This comes from Attitude, which is UK's best-selling LGBT magazine. The title is World Exclusive, Beauty and the Beast set to make Disney history with gay character.
Well, it's not surprising. It's sad, but not surprising.
We all knew it was going to happen.
I mean, Disney's hasn't been a Christian company, we know that, and
no.
They don't claim to be or anything like that.
No.
But the Beauty and the Beast movie that they say has a gay moment in it. I mean,
I want to be ambivalent to it in the sense of somebody who doesn't care either way whether they did a gay character or not, because I know there are some people, even on my end, who are saying that because they added this gay character, right? And keep in mind, I haven't watched Beauty and the Beast since I was like, I don't know, 9 or 10. I need to go back and watch all these Disney movies, though, because I need to, re-indoctrinate myself with all of their salacious, sexual, anti-Christian shenaniganery. In regards to Disney and Beauty and the Beast, you're seeing all these memes about Christians who are afraid of the gay person aren't afraid of the buffalo that Belle ends up falling in love with. The sort of like bestiality of Beauty and the Beast, right? Like, even though he's a man who is a beast, he's like a furry, I guess. I don't know. It's incredibly strange when creationists talk about homosexuals. Actually, just yesterday I watched Ray Comfort's Audacity movie. They make out the homosexuals to be really mean, really intolerant people who despise Christians. And if I can play devil's advocate or God's advocate, Jesus's advocate in this case, I know a lot of people in that demographic who have taken less than kindly to Christian attacks on their personages, which is not a lifestyle, it's who they are. Because a lot of Christians think that homosexuals can just change their behavior and thus bring more favor to God that way, when unfortunately that's not the case. And it's really sad to see homosexuals in today's culture, today's Christian culture, right, if you're around that, struggling so majorly with their identities and being able to adequately express themselves in a way that isn't even sexual most of the time, but is frowned upon by the church. Christians who have a very patriarchal view of society, where it's very male-oriented sense of virtue and justice and accountability for yourself, right? You're not supposed to necessarily care about other people, at least to the extent that you're worrying about what kind of damage their behavior can cause. When bad things happen, that's a result of your choices and your behavior and nothing else. And so that's something that I inherently disagree with people like Answers in Genesis.
I mean, people have to decide, when they draw lines for what they want their kids to see. And, I mean, you look on television these days, even watching the news.
Well, how can you escape it in some ways? You go through the grocery store aisle.
We certainly need to be teaching.
You go through the grocery aisle and see it? What does that even mean? I want to know what PhD Giggles is seeing in the grocery store. That, I don't know, is she seeing just gay people? People that she presumes to be gay? People that look gay? People that act gay? I apologize for the outburst, but I find it to be incredibly amusing hyperbole when Christians talk about all the gayness they see in society. That's absolutely ridiculous. That not only is that ridiculous, that's just hyperbole. That's just bananas. Cray bananas.
I tell you what is even more blatant, I think, is on their XD channel, the cartoon series, which is
Star versus the Forces of Evil.
I'd never heard of it.
Ironically enough.
I'd never heard of it.
Did she just call gay people evil? Is that what's being insinuated here? Because that would be incredibly, incredibly curious.
I've written an article along with one of our staff members, Avery, on A Time to Kiss Disney Goodbye, question mark. But here's an example of what they have there in that cartoon. And so we see this sort of thing happening more and more. You know, we see the gay agenda really being pushed.
Okay, so a little background on myself. I love my gays. I have yet to receive in the mail, email, in writing, Facebook post, direct message, anything of what this gay agenda is. What I found out, the gay agenda that Ken is talking about, that PhD Giggles are talking about, is the normalization of homosexual behavior. And that's something that Christians are incredibly scared of. It's a really weird dichotomy between what they think the gay agenda is and what homosexuals actually do, which is frequently, be picked on, bullied, harmed, and in some cases murdered by people who hold these same nonchalant views of, being gay is just an in thing now, or, being gay is a choice you can make. Why not make the right choice and stop being gay? That indifference comes from a mentality that kills people. And that's what I try. I mean, as much of an appeal to emotion as that is, it's very truthful, right? People are killed and are murdered because of, and tortured to death, and just absolutely, and tortured in life, right? Because of the fact that they cannot change, okay, regardless of how much they've tried or they desire to, because it would be easier to not have those things happen to you, right? But that permeation of indifference, if not outright blatant disregard for homosexuals, that kills people. It harms them on a physical and mental level. And that's something that I want Christians to realize. It does bring me to tears a lot of times when I talk about it, because the level of injustice is so great, and the level of disregard and sort of like flippancy is so great that it becomes hard to talk about without becoming emotional. Because I don't see PhD Giggles and Dr. Ken Ham crying about people being homosexual, because they're upset. They're mad that people are committing these behaviors in spite of God. I don't like you. I don't like what you do. Do what I do, and then I'll like you. And that tends to be a very Christian way of thinking. Domestic abuse, even. There was just recently a thing in the week saying a Mississippi lawmaker had shot down a domestic abuse bill, saying that domestic abusers need to have a change of heart, not divorce. They just need to repent and trust in Jesus. PhD Giggles and Dr. Ken Ham can say whatever they want to say, but the fact of the matter is, they know they're not to blame when something bad happens, because they're not the ones engaging in that sort of behavior.
We need to show love as Christians. It's interesting, as soon as you say you don't believe in gay marriage, you're called homophobic,
right. Intolerant.
If you don't agree with abortion, you're called a misogynist.
Right.
If you don't agree with the Islamic religion, you're an Islamophobe, and so on.
To an extent, Dr. Ken Ham, PhD Giggles' agreeance is correct. But again, it's that removal of accountability that is making these sorts of things bigger problems than they really are. If you don't agree with gay marriage and you're called a homophobe, that's typically true. Okay? I can't say, again, I don't want to use my own sample size as being like the absolute truth. It's not something that I can objectively verify outside of my own personal space here. Every single person I've ever met who has been against gay marriage has been against homosexuals in general. And they have been homophobic. I can't say that every person I've met who has been anti-abortion has been anti-women, but they do tend to have a certain set standard of behavior for women in regards to sexuality. Something along the lines of, you don't have sex till you're married, and you remain a virgin until your wedding night. And if you don't do those things, again, anything that happens after you don't do those things is on you. It's your fault. You have to live with it. You have to deal with it. You look at something like the embryo as being more important than the woman. I like to remind people it's natural born rights, not natural unborn rights. So why give less attention to that than you would to a drunk driver who, for a lot of people, morally deserves to die, right? A man like that, a woman like that deserves to die. They've killed people, right? An eye for an eye. They're trying to say things that are, in essence, really scary, I think, for someone like me on the other side. Granted, I was never a Christian. I have a different view of individuals who preach a gospel of what I presume to be intolerance to an extent, and who make arguments based on the incredibly fallible, unverifiable assumption that things are only based, that everything is a belief, in essence. And the creationist argument is to introduce doubt rather than to actually argue something. When you introduce doubt, you create a sense of confirmation bias to somebody who is a Christian, and they think, oh, I was thinking the same thing.
Right, just like with Disney. They're not starting with a Christian or biblical worldview.
That's true. That's why parents have to decide. They have to be very discerning what their children watch, and use things they see in the world as teaching moments to help them distinguish good from evil.
That's
right?
one of the things I think is very important.
And I'm not advocating, therefore, you go to all these movies and see these and use them.
Oh, no.
But
why would you not advocate that? He literally just took a step back and refuted what he just said about Disney, which is use these moments to help your children distinguish good from evil. Okay, I get that. People do that. Don't do what that guy in the movie says, or don't do what that guy in the video game does. But then I'm not advocating you go and watch all these movies. Like, what? What are you talking about? When you remove yourself from the equation of knowledge, right? From picking up what others are putting down, and especially the ones who aren't on your side, that does a huge disservice to your argument. And so what ends up happening, especially with Ken Ham's circle, you have this very closed and, dare I say, closeted way of thinking that doesn't take into account outside influences at all. I know Ken Ham likes to say, my kids know more about evolution than evolutionists do, and that's obviously not true. Go back in hindsight and see some of the things that Ken Ham has said about evolution in the past. Those who do not understand their opponent's arguments do not understand their own. That is a refrain that I have taken to heart in my time and my study of things like creationism, things that I'm really passionate about refuting. I devour the media, all of it. I read the articles, I watch the lectures, the sermons, as it were, the videos, the movies, everything. And to do that takes a lot of willpower and self-sacrifice and time sometimes. But it's a journey. And I think that Ken Ham is doing himself a disservice when he says that he's not advocating people go out and watch these sorts of things. There's no gray space in the world for Christians, and that's always kind of bothered me, is that it's a very absolute, like, if God didn't say that it was correct and true, it probably isn't, or it's influenced by man's word instead of God's word. And that's always been a big problem for me, because everything was written 2,000 years ago by ignorant desert savages. And I've never liked people who kept their kids away from movies, or who kept their kids away from video games because of X reason, because in my personal experience, what always ended up happening was they still had access to it, but they didn't have a basis for why they shouldn't be doing it. So it became, the forbidden fruit philosophy, where it's like your parents like, don't do this, and then you go out and do it. But it's different, and it's like that for Christians and for non-Christians who don't want their kids to be exposed to certain types of media or whatever it may be. You have to have a conversation with them. If you talk to them about it in a way that inflects transparency and your version of whatever your morality may be, perhaps, they have a better understanding. They can make a better choice in what they think and believe when they are finally exposed to it.
Bill Nye was being interviewed on Fox by Tucker Carlson Tonight, and what Tucker was doing was really trying to get him to say what percentage of climate change is caused by humans. And so Bill Nye kind of hem and hawed about it, and finally he said 100%. 100%
So
of
Bill
climate
Nye
change.
knows everything there is to know
Apparently.
about climates, about everything, and about everything.
I don't know if I would make that inference. Now, keep in mind, I didn't watch the interview with Tucker Carlson, so I know forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Or that's Catholic, so I can't do that. Or is it Catholic? Like, I don't know. It's a confession thing. Anyways, if he did say 100% of climate change was caused by humans, I feel like there may have been a misinterpretation there, and I don't want to go all like, that's not what he really said, because I don't know. I didn't watch it. I guess I should before I recorded this.
To what degree is climate change caused by human activities? 100% of climate change is caused by human activity? Is it 74.3%? It's settled science. Please tell us to what degree human activity is responsible.
So the word degree is a word that you chose, but the speed that climate change is happening is caused by humans. Instead of happening on timescales of millions of years, or let's say 15,000 years, it's happening on a timescale of decades and now years. Now, I offered...
Wait, but hold on. But to what extent is human activity responsible for speeding that up? I mean, please be more precise.
If that's the number you want. Humans are causing it to happen catastrophically fast.
And I think there's a big misconception between what climate change is and isn't. Creationists, I've heard Dr. Ken Ham and PhD Giggles talk about how, they say that it's not global warming anymore because it's not, the Earth isn't just heating up, it's cooling down, or it's getting too hot and it's getting too cold. And that, becomes a problem, because that comes down to what creationists believe about science, which is that because it's always changing when new information comes up, it's inherently fallible, and you shouldn't believe it. Science cannot be trusted. Scientists cannot be trusted to the extent that the Bible can be trusted, because the Bible has never changed. Science changes all the time. That's why climate change isn't real, because they call it climate change now when they used to call it global warming. So that's like the gotcha. So it tends to just fall flat Earth, if I may say. But that's hopefully another conversation for another day, because if there's one thing that I can agree with Answers in Genesis, it's that they definitely refute a flat Earth. So that's good. We can agree to agree on that. Absolutely.
But as a scientist, when I read that, I think nothing in science is ever 100%. I mean, no one would, as one of the most unscientific things that you could say, to think that you have all the knowledge available and you can say this conclusively, that it's 100%.
Really, he's playing God to say that.
Well, he's playing a scientist.
He's playing an infallible scientist.
He's not really one. He's an engineer, technically, but...
Okay, I'm incredibly disturbed by what just happened, and I'm so glad that this is the Answers news that I am doing my commentary on, because it's the newest one for me, right? It's the 6th. Oh my fucking god.
Morgan, I try not to swear on this channel.
Fuck that.
All right.
Did you just hear what just... I mean, obviously you heard what just happened, and I'm being rhetorical, but it said almost exactly what I said before I continued on this tangent that PhD Giggles and Dr. Ken Ham are doing. But from what I garner, Bill Nye is not a real scientist. He's an engineer. He's an infallible scientist / engineer, and he claims to know everything. And science can never claim to know everything 100%. Jesus Christ. There's a lot to work with there. But I'll try and keep it as cordial and tasteful as I can. So, engineers are not real scientists. You learn something new every day. And I trust PhD Giggles, because she has... I mean, I'm pretty sure she's a PhD. She's a PhD molecular geneticist or what have you, who believes in young Earth creation. So her worldview of there being a very literal Adam and Eve transcends into genetics. So science claiming to know things 100%. Now, in a sense, I want to say she's correct, right? So it's interesting to me to see just the doubt that creationists introduce in so many of their arguments. It's just doubt science because science can't be true about everything, which is a completely false statement. It's completely false. Like, I want people to realize what science means. Like, take away all the extraneous bullshit of science. Take it away. Take away the observational, the operational, the hypothesis, the thesis. Take it all away. The experimentation. Take it all away. Take it all away and bring science back down to its most derivative of semantical forms, which is science, which is the rules of science. The rules of science is a process. By introducing doubt, by saying you have a different interpretation of the evidence, which is the creationist fucking mantra, you're not making an argument. You're introducing doubt for the sake of argument. You want it to be different. So you latch onto things like God's word, man's word. You latch onto, it's a difference of foundations. It's a clash of worldviews, the appeal to emotion, right? It's a clash between Christians and between secularists and people who don't believe in God. It's a clash. We're being persecuted because they can't prove that it's true. They can't do it. They're not predictive. And when they want to be predictive, they look at the Bible. They don't look at, okay, this is what our theories, this is what our research, this is what our ideas, which are firmly grounded in Scripture a majority of the time, say about something that's true. And this is, I think, for me, one of the biggest, I mean, because there's a lot, obviously, huge issue with creationism is that it introduces doubt where doubt is just implicitly unable to exist. And this goes back to Ken Ham's debate with Bill Nye, which, bless his heart, I believe was a huge mistake, but was an incredible, it actually got me into researching about creationism and that sort of thing. But if you can find a fossil from a bottom layer on a top layer, you would change the world. You would change fundamental aspects of science that are, in essence, like untenable at this point. It would be like discovering aliens at this point. Like, you would change all of fucking biology. You would change all of geology. You would have to change and maybe say that, okay, maybe there was a flood. Okay, not this stupid, like, they swam to the top bullshit or they sank to the bottom bullshit, which is all presumptuous, just fucking garbage. So at the risk of being presumptuous to that extent, I do challenge creationists to refute science, things that they think are not true, things that they want to introduce doubt for, using the scientific methodology of discovering things or disproving them, to challenge it on a basis that isn't just misinterpreting what you don't understand, what you don't know, what you aren't qualified to know, and what the layperson isn't going to understand and is going to have confirmation bias for. You're doing yourself an immense disservice, argumentatively and intellectually, to say that because something doesn't seem right to you, it can't be true.
The question has been, well, did the Industrial Revolution kind of help us mask some of the effects of the climate change because there was maybe more production and things like that? Is that such a bad thing, And that's one of the things, is climate change really bad? Because if we can grow more things in more places to provide more food, is that a bad thing?
I think what PhD Giggles is doing here is she's trying to divert attention away from what climate change alarmists say is alarming about climate change, which is never, we can grow things in more places, so climate change is good, or we can produce things in more places, so climate change is good. Obviously, it's a good thing to be able to get shit that's out of season when it's out of season, and have it be fresh and nice and whatever. But at the same time, if you're doing that in a way that is detrimental to just the entire geology of the earth, or on a local level, you're having cities that are threatened to be put underwater. And in some places, that's happening right now. It's things you can see, things that you can look up. Isn't it exciting to be an atheist? We know why certain toxins, we know why certain gases, we know why fossil fuels are bad for even the weather changing. We know that shit and hairspray in the 70s or 80s or whatever the fuck it was, the aerosol cans, were bad for the ozone layer. And that it's now recovering. Like, these are things that are not untruths. These are very, very real facts. These are the unfakest of news, or the non-fakest of news, whatever that may be. The issue is not production. The issue is not producing more goods. The issue is the perpetuation of climate change becoming normal and thus, again, removing accountability for when bad things happen, when New York is underwater, or when Florida is underwater, or when the polar bears don't have a home and that sort of thing. And Answers in Genesis is very big on not giving a shit about polar bears. You can't say that climate change and that the Industrial Revolution and that production and deforestation are good things for the environment, unless you are a biblical creationist. And what's the point in saving this world when you have another world to go to when you die? You know, and that might not be implicitly what PhD Giggles and Dr. Ken Ham are saying, but I believe it's what they believe.
Some comments. Love these broadcasts. Hello from BJU, because I spoke there recently.
Sweet.
What are those little things
Dr.
going across the
Mitchell
screen?
Emojis.
Emojis.
Gosh.
Okay. All right. I keep forgetting that.
So the next one comes from Seeker, and it says habitable exoplanets might not be very Earth-like after all.
Wait a minute.
Basically, these astronomers are saying, well, hold on. I'm not so sure how NASA is defining habitable. There's a lot of things we really don't know. So how can you really say it's habitable? Which is exactly what our astronomer said
After
a few
reading
weeks
the
ago.
actual paper.
I think it's important to realize here that this isn't necessarily a win for Answers in Genesis. This kind of shit happens all the fucking time in the scientific community. They want to get people excited. They want to get people interested and not just, oh, there's no life on other planets because God wouldn't have made aliens, even though the Pope says that aliens would be cool. Like, that would be pretty dope. So, I mean, the fact that they're obviously PhD Giggles is laughing about this one. We had Dr. Danny Faulkner on and et cetera, et cetera. I get it, but I don't think that it's a win more than it is just, you know, the scientific community trying to drum up interest and get people excited about space. It's nice to be able to go out and say, there's a possibility. They didn't say there was a chance. This happens all the fucking time. You know, we find these exoplanets in these areas where, you know, there's a possibility of the factors being consistent with harboring life or life forms or whatever it may be. Not necessarily, you know, aliens or things on our level of evolutionary scale, because we don't have a model for that. But to say that it's outwardly untrue and to say that things were incredibly presumptuous is not necessarily something that I find to be a win. Obviously, they're just trying to drum up excitement. I could understand that from a majority of the headlines we see. Like, I'll see it when I believe it, and so will NASA, and so will the public. But if we want to get people excited about discovering things, discovering new minerals or whatever it may be, I'm not a big space person, but I don't know. Minerals are cool, I guess. I like rocks, so maybe that's more my style. But I think what Answers in Genesis thinks is that when NASA or when people come out with these ideas of there being these exoplanets where there's a possibility of life, they think implicitly like little green men and intelligent life forms and those sorts of things, whereas we know more than likely the first alien we'll ever come in contact with will be a microbe of some point, of some, you know, at what was I trying to say? I don't remember what I was going to say. Well, we know what that reason is, but I'm trailing off as I have been with the rest of these.
That's okay, Morgan. You're not even halfway through yet, and you've said a lot of words. Let's not burn you out on that first episode. We can call this a day.
Hey, I know we're getting near the end, and
Right.
we try to keep this to 30 minutes.
Right.
Because
So-
it's like the big fireworks display.
Okay,
What do you got
okay,
for a climax?
all right.
If you're looking for more Morgan, you can follow her at Indigo Gentleman on Twitter. I hesitate to ask, but leave us a comment below to let us know if you agree or disagree with Morgan on any points she made here. Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down before you go, and if you want to be notified when there's new Paulogia content, why not hit subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thanks again, Morgan. Later.